So, there I was, standing right at the edge of my own property, watching Beatrice's ridiculously oversized $220,000 wedding tent billow in the breeze like some kind of gaudy royal pavilion. Music was blaring, the bass thumping in my chest, and guests in their impractical stilettos were stomping all over my precious soybean sprouts. And then, if you can believe it, her caterer had the nerve, the sheer audacity, to ask if I could move my tractor because it was ruining the aesthetic. That's when something inside me just snapped. Calmly, deliberately, I flipped the switch, and the manure spreaders roared to life. Smash cut to intro screen. How in the Sam Hill did it come to this? Let's rewind a bit. I'm Jedediah Jed Stone, the sheriff of the sleepy little county nestled right here in the Appalachian foothills. Sprawling forests, winding back roads, the kind of place where folks still wave when they pass you, even if they secretly can't stand your guts. I spent a solid 20 years in the military before finally moving back home to care for my old man after his first stroke. He passed last spring, leaving me the land and the hunting lodge he built with his own two hands over 30 years ago. He used to say that lodge was his cathedral, and standing there, surrounded by the whispering pines and the quiet peace, I finally understood what he meant. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was legacy, family, everything he taught me about patience, grit, and keeping your boots clean even when the world's knee-deep in manure. Now, enter Priscilla Vandergolt. Oh boy. Recent divorce with a capital V. Looked like she'd raided a JCPenney catalog from way back in 2003 and drove a fancy foreign car that had clearly never seen a speck of gravel. The kind of woman who genuinely believed every single problem could be solved with a form, a fine, or a sickly sweet fake smile. I'd seen her around once or twice, back when she was still playing Stepford wife in the cul-de-sac right next to my property. Didn't think much of her until she decided my dad's lodge threatened the harmony of the neighborhood. See, my lodge sits just outside the HOA boundaries, maybe 10 measly feet outside that imaginary line she thought gave her dominion over all things natural. It's not part of the HOA, never has been, never will be. But that didn't stop her from marching right up to my front porch one Saturday morning, holding a clipboard like it was the Ten Commandments carved in stone. I was halfway through replacing a busted storm shutter when I heard the unmistakable click-clack of high heels on my gravel driveway. I turned, and there she was, perched like a smug buzzard on a fence post. "Hi there," she chirped, all saccharine sweetness, as if she hadn't just trespassed onto private property. "I'm Priscilla, the HOA president for Sycamore Bluff. We've had a few complaints about your structure," she said, the word structure dripping with disdain. I wiped my hands on a greasy rag and raised an eyebrow. "You mean my family lodge?" She gave me the tight, practiced smile. "Yes, well, the logs are untreated, and your woodpile is visible from the road. It's just not cohesive with the community aesthetic." I glanced behind her at the vast forest stretching into the rolling hills. Not a soul in sight for half a mile. The community? You mean the raccoons? That didn't go over well at all. She huffed, pulled a stapled packet from her sacred clipboard, and thrust it at me. "These are the HOA guidelines. Section 8 covers structure visibility, landscaping, and color palettes." I didn't even take the packet. "I'm not in the HOA." Her smile cracked, just a tiny little fissure. "You're adjacent to it, and that has visual impact. We're trying to preserve property values. Now, here's the thing about me, I don't cotton to confrontation, but I sure as heck don't run from it either." I told her plainly, "This land's been in my family since 1952. That lodge predates your entire subdivision, and unless your bylaws were signed by God himself, they don't apply here." I figured that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. The very next week, signs started popping up along the gravel road leading to my property, "Private HOA residents only." They looked official, laminated and nailed to sturdy stakes, complete with her phony HOA logo. One was blocking the trailhead I use for hiking, another was right at the bend in the road, half covering the wooden sign my dad had lovingly carved decades ago, Welcome to Fox Hollow. I yanked them all up that night and burned them in a roaring fire pit. Next morning, they were back, like stubborn weeds. Then came the fines, mailed to my house in crisp white envelopes with her fancy HOA letterhead: violation, unauthorized structure. Violation, unapproved fire pit. Violation, wildlife attractant apparently, leaving out a little corn for the deer now constituted criminal negligence in the twisted mind of Priscilla Vandergolt. Again, not in the HOA. I filed an official cease and desist, citing property law, zoning boundaries, and the very clear, well-defined line where the HOA's authority ended. I even offered to meet with her civilly. She responded by forwarding my infractions to the local utility company. That's when things got personal, real fast. I came home one evening, and the power was off. No storms, no downed lines, just gone. I checked the meter, and sure enough, it had been disconnected manually. I called the utility office, and the woman on the other end, bless her heart, told me a complaint had been filed: safety hazard. Uninhabited structure. Immediate risk. I had to fax over land deeds and legal documentation just to get my darn power turned back on. This wasn't some passive-aggressive neighbor dispute anymore. This was a full-blown campaign. She wanted that lodge gone, and she didn't care how she got it. What she didn't realize was, I've got more patience than a church pew on Easter Sunday, and I play the long game. So, I started watching, collecting, building a file. Every snarky letter she sent, every bogus fine, photos of her illegal signs, records of her blatant tampering, even testimonies from neighbors she'd bullied. I wasn't planning to use any of it yet. I was hoping, stupidly, that she'd get bored and move on to harassing someone's mailbox flowers instead. But no. She escalated. One Saturday morning, I noticed tire tracks along the trail behind my shed. Followed them, and what did I find? She, or someone working for her, had tried to dump a whole heap of contractor trash in the creek: old, moldy drywall scraps, rusty paint cans. I reported it, cleaned it up myself, and decided it was high time to set some serious boundaries. I posted a large, sturdy wooden sign right on the property line: private land. No trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. Simple, clear, and to the point. Next morning, it was gone. Not just gone, but replaced with a cheap plastic sign that read: future site of Sycamore Bluffs Nature Park sponsored by your HOA. That's when the cold dread really set in. This wasn't just a power trip. It was a land grab. She wanted my property annexed, turned into some manicured playground for weekend brunchers. My father's hand-built lodge, probably flattened to make room for a yoga deck and gluten-free picnic tables. But the final straw, the absolute last nerve that flipped the switch in my head from simmering tolerance to total, unadulterated war, was the wedding tent. She didn't even ask. Just rolled in with a fleet of trucks, caterers swarming like ants, and enough florists to decorate a small country. Claimed the field behind my barn was ideal for her niece's rustic ceremony. Claimed the county gave her verbal approval. I stood there, jaw clenched, watching as they hammered stakes into my land, rolled out fancy carpets over my hard-won soybeans, and set up rows of pristine white chairs like some kind of bridal magazine photo shoot. And then, the caterer, this smug little guy in a starched white shirt, walked right up to me, looked me dead in the eyes, and asked if I could move my John Deere tractor out of the frame. That's when I calmly, deliberately, flipped the switch on the manure spreaders. What happened next went viral, but we're not there yet. Because while everyone was busy filming the glorious chaos and scrubbing wedding cake off their rented tuxedos, I got a call from the fire department. A fire out in the woods, near the lodge. And I knew, deep down in my gut, before I even turned on the siren, before I saw the first tendril of smoke curling into the sky, before the acrid smell of ash coated the back of my throat, I knew she'd taken it one step too far. This time, I wasn't going to wait. I knew before I even reached the bridge, before I saw the massive plume of dark smoke slicing through the sky like a funeral banner, before the radio crackled with frantic updates from dispatch, before the first fleck of ash hit my windshield, I knew that fire wasn't an accident. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't some careless camper. And it sure as hell wasn't a controlled burn. It was arson. And in the pit of my stomach, that same place that always told me when someone was lying through their teeth, I knew exactly who was responsible. By the time I reached the site, the lodge was already gone. Flames had ripped through the old timber like it was so much kindling. 30 years of my father's sweat and toil reduced to a blackened skeleton. The porch had collapsed in on itself, the chimney stood alone like a stark gravestone. The old elk head he'd mounted above the fireplace, the one he bagged with me on my 12th birthday, was just a pile of gray ash. The windows were all shattered, twisted frames glowing orange with the intense heat. Firefighters were still dousing the perimeter, desperately trying to keep the inferno from jumping into the surrounding brush. And I stood there, soaked in sweat and smoke, teeth clenched so hard I thought they might shatter. One of the fire chiefs, a good old boy named Charlie, walked over to me slowly, his helmet dangling in his hand. He looked grim. He didn't have to say anything, but he did anyway. "We found a gas can," he said quietly, pointing off to the side of the foundation, hidden under some scorched brush. My jaw twitched. Could have been someone dumping trash. Charlie hesitated, then shook his head. "There's more. The ignition points aren't natural. Accelerant trails. Multiple of 'em. And there's, well, you should see it." He led me behind what used to be the tool shed. There in the mud were boot prints. Not firefighter prints. Not hiking boots. Tactical style tread. Size 8, maybe 9. Not big enough to be one of my guys. Not anyone I recognized. And definitely not my own worn work boots. But you know who does wear brand new tactical boots when she's playing dress up in the woods? Beatrice. Just 2 days ago, I'd spotted her at the local army surplus store, haggling with the cashier over the price of a camouflage jacket. I remember it vividly because she insisted on calling it couture combat wear. And now, there were her distinct footprints in the mud behind my dead father's burning lodge, wearing the same boots she was showing off like she was headed to a fashion war zone. But the real nail in the coffin, the undeniable proof, that came later. Because I'm not a complete fool. Ever since the bogus power shut off, I'd started installing backup cameras around the property. Not obvious ones, mind you. Wildlife cams, cleverly hidden among the trees and up in the rafters of the barn. Motion triggered, cloud sensed my little insurance policy. And guess what? Not even fire can erase cloud footage. Back at the station, I sat down with my laptop, opened the footage folder, and fast-forwarded through hours of squirrels chasing each other and wind-blown branches swaying in the breeze. And then, there she was. Priscilla Vandergolt, HOA royalty in full camo regalia, skulking around like a bad extra from a low-budget war movie, carrying a bright red plastic gas can. She approached the side of the lodge just before dusk, looking over her shoulder twice, then deliberately dumping liquid along the perimeter. She paused, struck a match, lit something a rag, maybe, and dropped it with a flourish, like she was lighting the Olympic torch. The fire caught quick. She watched for a second, a sickeningly satisfied look on her face, then bolted. She didn't even bother with a mask, not a hood, not a scarf, nothing. Just her perfectly ironed wilderness outfit and a smug little smile as she destroyed the one thing left of my father's legacy. She burned it down and walked away like it was some kind of statement. I didn't move for a full minute, just stared at the paused frame of her face glowing in the firelight. I could have called her out right then, could have marched over to her prim little McMansion and slapped a pair of cuffs on her right there in front of the HOA board and her poodle groomer. But I didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about arson anymore. It wasn't just about revenge, though believe me, that was a strong undercurrent. It was about everything else she'd done to me and to everyone else around her. The fake fines, the illegal signs, the relentless harassment, the power games, the stolen property, the outright lies. So, I built the case slowly, quietly, meticulously. I pulled phone records, traced purchases, got security footage from the gas station where she filled that gas can. I talked to neighbors she'd harassed, people she'd threatened with legal action for things as trivial as hanging wind chimes or painting their mailbox an unsanctioned shade of blue. I dug through public records and discovered something very interesting. The HOA bylaws she waved around like holy scripture had never been legally filed with the county. Meaning all the authority she'd been throwing around was completely fabricated, a house of cards built on a foundation of deceit. And it didn't stop there. With some more digging, I learned Beatrice had bullied every other HOA board member into resigning, or more accurately, she forged their resignations. They never quit. She just submitted letters on their behalf, complete with laughably fake signatures, to the internal newsletter and declared victory. No elections, no votes, no meetings. She declared herself president for life, and no one had bothered to challenge her because, well, she was exhausting, terrifying, and utterly relentless. But now, I had the smoking gun, literally. There was only one question left: why? Why torch the lodge? Why take it that far? The answer came from her niece, of all people. I didn't expect it, but she came by the station the next morning. Young woman, maybe mid-20s, nervous but determined. Said she wanted to apologize for the wedding incident and also, maybe, she had some information. Apparently, Beatrice wanted the lodge gone because she had big plans, grandiose plans. She'd been pitching a wellness retreat expansion to the HOA, hoping to convert that entire section of forest into a commercial property spa, hiking trails, gazebo, the whole overpriced fantasy. The lodge, and my stubborn refusal to play along, was the only thing standing in her way. She figured if it burned down and I got fed up, I'd sell the land cheap, move on, be out of her perfectly coiffed hair. One less backwoods redneck with property rights to worry about. I thanked her for her honesty and made sure she got home safe. Then, I opened a new file: arson, fraud, forgery, criminal impersonation, harassment, abuse of power. And that was just what I had so far. I wasn't going to kick in her door just yet. No. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to keep digging her own grave with every smug HOA notice she posted, every fake fine she mailed, every neighborhood rule she invented out of thin air. But the final piece, the one I wasn't expecting, came 3 days later. Just as I was preparing the formal arrest warrant, I got a call from one of my deputies. Said I should come down to the county clerk's office. There, tucked in the corner of a newly submitted permit application, was Beatrice's signature on a document claiming my land as conditionally annexed community property under HOA expansion efforts. She had officially filed paperwork declaring ownership of my burned land. And in doing so, she'd committed one last, beautiful, fatal mistake. She gave me the legal excuse to burn down her entire fake empire. The question now wasn't whether she was going down. The question was how loud I could make it when she hit the ground. I could have arrested her right then and there. Had the footage, the prints, the gas can, the paper trail, the motive, and now a certified document where she claimed legal dominion over land she didn't own after burning it to the ground. But see, I didn't want a simple arrest. I wanted a spectacle. I wanted every smug, condescending letter she'd ever written to echo back at her in a packed courtroom. I wanted her empire, her fake authority, her delusional HOA monarchy to go down in flames twice as hard as she thought she'd burned my lodge. So, I went to work, quietly, methodically. And I didn't just focus on the arson. No sir. I dug into everything. Her HOA board, her personal finances, her legal filings, the shady contractor work she ordered through cash-only deals. I even pulled zoning complaints and noticed a disturbing pattern. Every property she'd find or threaten were properties owned by older folks, single moms, or folks too busy working 2 jobs to push back. In other words, people she figured wouldn't fight back. And in most cases, they hadn't. Until now. I reached out to those neighbors, one by one. Saturday at their kitchen tables, drank their lukewarm coffee, listened to their stories. And man, did they have stories. One sweet woman, Mrs. Gable, had her backyard bird bath dismantled for being an unauthorized water feature. Another fella, Mr. Henderson, was fined for using non-regulation holiday lights. The kicker? He's Jewish. She fined him for displaying a menorah. She charged late fees for dues that didn't even exist, threatened legal action with law firms that turned out to be completely fake. And every single fine came with a neat little warning about possible lien placement, which she apparently used to scare folks into paying. She was running her own little dictatorship, funded by fear and wrapped in bureaucratic red tape, and no one had stopped her because no one knew where to start. But now, they had me. And I was done being polite. I called in a few favors from friends in state-level offices, got a fast-track review on her forged HOA charter. Confirmed what I already suspected, the document had never been properly notarized, and most of the signatures were copied from a year-old yard sale sign-up sheet. She literally used the names from people who came to buy used crock pots and folding chairs, then declared them voting members of her new regime. With that information locked in, I filed a formal report to the county clerk, flagged the HOA as operating illegally, and got the ball rolling on having their authority revoked entirely. But that was just step one. I wanted to make sure when she went down, she couldn't slither her way into another neighborhood and pull the same stunt all over again. Meanwhile, she was getting bolder, like a cornered raccoon with a stolen pearl necklace. She must have sensed I wasn't responding the way I used to. No more angry emails, no frantic calls, no sputtering rebuttals. So, she ramped things up. Sent out a mass newsletter to the neighborhood claiming I was under investigation for aggressive and antisocial behavior, complete with a blurry photo of me mid-yawn at the gas station, trying to make me look unhinged. She claimed I'd been harassing her and trying to illegally prevent HOA expansion for personal vendettas. That was cute. Then, she held a mandatory community meeting in the park across from her house and passed around a petition to have me removed as sheriff. She even had signs printed. My personal favorite said, "No law above the HOA," which honestly just made my job that much easier. But she didn't stop there. Oh no. She moved on to the final, most ridiculous stage of her delusion. She tried to break into the ruins of the lodge. I caught her on my camera system again, this time with a measuring tape and some shifty-looking fella she claimed was a restoration consultant. She was trying to appraise the ashes of a building she torched herself. When I showed up in uniform, she tried to play it cool. "Oh, Jedediah," she said, all fake smiles and squinting like I owed her money, "I was just checking the site for insurance purposes." "Your insurance?" I asked, letting the question hang in the air like the smell of burnt wood. She blinked. "Well, community insurance. We're assuming responsibility now. It's being annexed into the HOA proper. It's in transition." I looked down at the mud where her consultant was standing, right on top of the old fire pit my dad had dug with a spade and a bad back. My jaw locked so tight I felt my molars grind. "Priscilla," I said calmly, my voice dangerously low, "you're trespassing, and I'm going to ask you to leave before I add another count to your ever-growing file." That wiped the smile right off her Botoxed face. "You can't be serious." "I'm the president of." I cut her off. "You're the president of a fake organization with no legal authority, operating under forged documents, who committed arson, fraud, and is about to find herself in handcuffs unless she gets the hell off my land." The consultant took one look at me, muttered something about not being paid enough to deal with this, and hightailed it to his beat-up pickup truck. Beatrice turned bright red. She opened her mouth like she was about to go full operatic soprano, but then caught herself. Maybe, just maybe, she realized the look in my eyes wasn't just annoyance anymore. It was something else, something she hadn't seen before, the quiet fury of a man who's been patient for far too long. The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse and filed the arrest warrant myself. Didn't trust anyone else with it. Arson. Vandalism. filing false claims, harassment, fraudulent legal documents, impersonating an official, wire tampering. The charges stacked higher than her Christmas tree made of gaudy, gold-plated HOA ornaments. I got the judge to sign off that afternoon. But I wasn't done. I coordinated with a few of her victims, the folks she'd bullied and fined and threatened. I let them know what was coming and asked if they wanted to witness justice firsthand. They showed up in lawn chairs, with bags of popcorn. One guy even brought a megaphone. When we pulled up to her pristine White House, she was hosting yet another meeting in her perfectly manicured front yard. Folding tables covered in clipboards, ridiculous HOA banners flapping in the breeze. She had her back turned as I walked up with my deputies. She was mid-sentence, complaining about someone's hedge height, when I said her name. Priscilla Vandergolt. I called out, my voice even and firm. She turned, annoyed at the interruption, then froze. I stepped forward and read the charges, every last one. Her face turned from smug to confused to furious to pain. Ha! I could see the exact moment her brain caught up with reality and she realized the man she'd been harassing for months, the one whose property she burned, the one she thought was just some simple country sheriff with a badge, was about to end her little reign of terror. "You can't arrest me!" she shrieked. "I'm the president. This is illegal." I pulled out the warrant. "This says otherwise." And as we escorted her, kicking and screaming, to the cruiser, the neighbor she tormented actually applauded. Someone even started playing the national anthem from a Bluetooth speaker. She screamed something about lawsuits and civil liberties and tried to throw herself dramatically onto her meticulously manicured hydrangeas. It didn't help. But just before we drove off, one of my deputies leaned over and whispered, "You still want to charge her for the wedding tent?" I smiled. "Oh, I'm just getting started." Court day came faster than I expected. Not because the system moves quickly, it usually doesn't, but because I made it a personal mission to ensure every I was dotted and every T was crossed. I wanted this airtight. I wanted her to walk in thinking she could talk her way out of anything, like she always had, and then watch as it all unraveled in front of her. She showed up in a beige pantsuit that screamed, "I've never done anything wrong in my entire life," flanked by some bottom-shelf lawyer who looked like he was billing her by the minute just to pretend she had a defense. The courtroom wasn't full, but the people who mattered were there. Mrs. Gable, clutching her bird bath photos. Mr. Henderson, with his mailbox color printouts. A half-dozen other neighbors with stacks of fake fines and threatening HOA letters she'd mailed them like confetti. And me, in uniform, sitting ramrod straight, not gloating, just waiting. Beatrice, because no one was calling her Priscilla anymore, tried to put on her usual act. She spun the arson as a misunderstanding. Said she'd been clearing brush, maybe accidentally spilled some gasoline, didn't know the structure was occupied or valuable. Claimed the lodge was abandoned, and she was doing the community a favor by making space for green development. Her lawyer threw around words like miscommunication, civic duty, and administrative error. But when the footage played, the crystal-clear video of her in full camo gear, deliberately dumping accelerant around the base of the lodge and lighting it with what looked like manic glee, it was over. You could feel the air go out of the room. Her own lawyer looked down at his notes and stopped talking. The judge paused, eyebrows raised so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline, and then quietly asked the bailiff to rewind it. Everyone watched it again in stunned silence. After that, it wasn't about if she was guilty. It was about how guilty. The judge didn't hold back. 5 years of probation. Mandatory community service. Full restitution to cover all damages, and not the pretend kind either. Real restitution. Court-approved valuations of the lodge, the property damage, and the emotional distress she caused. The number made her flinch. Over $800,000. Her insurance, of course, didn't cover intentional arson. That left her assets, her fancy foreign car, her dwindling savings, and, of course, her beloved McMansion. I didn't share. I didn't gloat. I just watched as her whole world cracked under the weight of her own arrogance. But the best part wasn't even in the courtroom. It came a week later when I filed a civil suit on top of the criminal conviction. I wasn't in it for the money. I already had the lodge insured for part of its value, and I could rebuild. But I wanted it public. I wanted every document she ever filed, every fake fine, and every illegal signature exposed. I wanted it on the record that everything she built was based on lies. And it worked. The county reviewed her so-called HOA charter and declared it invalid, without any legal standing whatsoever. Every action she took as president was nullified. Every lien, every fine, every threat gone, poof. The board, if you could even call it that, dissolved. The bank moved fast, too. With her house tied up in court-mandated payments and no HOA funds left to cover her exorbitant legal fees, she had to put her McMansion up for sale. Last I heard, it's been sitting on the market with a sagging price-reduced sign out front. Nobody wants to live in the place the HOA tyrant used as her castle. And what about the community she tormented? They threw a real barbecue the weekend after the verdict. Ribs, cornbread, cold beer, kids running barefoot through the sprinklers. No clipboards, no rule books, no HOA bans on plastic cutlery. People smiled again. Laughed. It was like the air got lighter. Mrs. Gable brought me a plate and said it felt like the end of a very long winter. I knew exactly what she meant. As for the lodge, I rebuilt it. Not exactly the same. Some things can't be replaced. But I used fireproof materials this time, reinforced the frame, added solar panels, and built a stone fire pit right out front. I even carved a new sign, same style as my dad's, with one small change. Underneath Fox Hollow Lodge, I burned in another line with a wood-burning pen, Priscilla-proof since 2024. It made me chuckle. I think my dad would have liked it too. The final cherry on top came in the form of her community service. By court order, she was assigned to the county maintenance program, cleaning graffiti, repainting picnic benches, scrubbing out the public restrooms at the park she once tried to claim was private HOA land. I drove by once, saw her in a bright neon vest, hose in hand, power washing a sidewalk while a group of teenagers recorded her on their phones. She tried to turn away from the camera, but someone yelled, "Hey, aren't you the lady who burned down a forest?" And the look on her face, well, it was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost. She still tries now and then, sends desperate appeals, writes rambling letters claiming she was framed, misunderstood, politically targeted. None of it goes anywhere. Every agency she contacts already has the evidence. Every judge she whines to has already seen the footage. Her name is mud, and not even the defunct HOA newsletter could spin that into anything salvageable. But I don't think about her much anymore these days. I spend more time up at the new lodge, fixing the place up, hunting in the fall, drinking coffee on the deck when the fog rolls through the trees like smoke that didn't come to destroy. I planted wildflowers where the old foundation used to be, let the forest take back what was stolen. I even rebuilt the memorial bench I'd made for my dad, stained it darker this time, sealed it twice, bolted it firmly to the ground. Sometimes people still ask me if I regret not arresting her sooner, if I wish I'd thrown the book at her the first time she stepped foot on my land with her nonsense clipboard and rules that didn't exist. And maybe, in some other version of the world, I would have. But in this one, I'm glad I waited. Because it wasn't just about punishing her. It was about showing everyone like her that you can't bully your way into power and expect to walk away clean. You want to act like the law doesn't apply to you? Fine. Just don't be surprised when the guy you've been messing with turns out to be the one writing the arrest warrant. In the end, all she had to do was leave me alone, respect a boundary that wasn't hers to cross. But Beatrice never saw a boundary she didn't try to claim, never heard a no she didn't think she could argue into a yes. And so, she lost everything. Me? I gained peace. And maybe, just maybe, A damn good story to tell whenever someone new moves in and asks what happened to the HOA around here. I usually smile, point toward the hills, and say, let's just say they picked the wrong property to mess with. Then I offer them coffee. No rules, no fines, no forms. Just neighbors, the way it should be. The valuable lesson here is that true authority comes from respect and the law, not from fabricated rules and intimidation. Trying to exert control through dishonest means will ultimately lead to your own downfall. What did you think of this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of justice served, be sure to like this and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one.